Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I never thought my peaceful life in a small neighborhood in Peru would turn into a battleground, but that's exactly what happened when my neighbor, Mary, decided to make my life a living hell. She had a penchant for meddling in everyone's affairs, but she had set her sights on me and my family's restaurant. And little did she know, I wasn't about to back down. Our family-owned restaurant, which my parents had started on a plot of land next to our house, had become a beloved local spot. The aroma of authentic Peruvian dishes filled the air, attracting customers from all over the city. But Mary couldn't stand the fact that our property didn't fit her vision of a perfectly manicured street. She saw our restaurant as an eyesore, an aberration in her quest for conformity. One fateful evening, as I was closing up the restaurant, Mary waltzed in, her judgmental eyes scanning every corner. With an air of superiority, she condescendingly remarked on the charm of our establishment. Then she got straight to the point. She wanted to buy our land and our restaurant. Her assumption that I would simply cave in to her demands without question infuriated me. When I firmly declined her offer, Mary's annoyance turned into a full-blown tantrum. She accused me of heinous crimes, insinuating that I was involved in drug trafficking. Her false allegations spread like wildfire throughout the neighborhood, tarnishing the reputation of our beloved restaurant. My customers dwindled, and the once bustling establishment grew eerily quiet. I felt a sense of helplessness and despair, but amidst the chaos, a glimmer of hope emerged, a string of nighttime vandalism that seemed targeted at our restaurant. Suspecting that Mary was behind the attacks, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I installed surveillance cameras, strategically positioned to capture any signs of mischief. It was a risky move, but I was determined to catch the culprit red-handed. My hunch proved to be right. Just a day after installing the cameras, disaster struck again. The vandal broke into our restaurant, wreaking havoc and stealing money. As I reviewed the footage, my heart sank. There they were, Mary and her venomous daughter, vandalizing our livelihood. The police wasted no time. Armed with the undeniable evidence, they confronted Mary at her doorstep. Predictably, she denied everything, resorting to her manipulative tactics. But this time, justice prevailed. The law saw through her lies and held her accountable for her actions. Mary and her daughter were forced to pay for the damages they had caused, and I pressed charges against them. Their reign of terror had come to an end, and they were forced to leave the neighborhood. The victory was sweet, but it was just the beginning. News of Mary's arrest spread like wildfire, shining a spotlight on our restaurant. People flocked to support us, eager to taste the dishes they had missed during the tumultuous times. The restaurant flourished like never before, and my determination to rebuild what was broken paid off. To commemorate the downfall of my tormentor, I introduced a new signature dish to our menu, the Vendetta Platter. It was a fiery combination of refried beans, extra spicy pork, and peppers, topped with a scorching red sauce. Customers savored every bite, relishing in the poetic justice that came with each mouthful. The next one is a pro-revenge story. So it's been about 4 years since this happened. I was about 18 at the time, working for a security company. There were constant call-offs and no-shows. I have no idea why. But being so young and naive, I was constantly working 16-hour shifts and not coming home until 8 a.m. Also, I lived with my father at the time. The time frame of this was around the 4th of July. I finally had a day off, and my best friend was back in town for vacation. We decided to get together and chip in on some good old American fireworks. To be fair, I have had nothing but bad experiences with fireworks, so I had no idea how this would be any different. We got home with the fireworks, and we laid them all out on the floor. Sparklers, bottle rockets, cakes, and Roman candles. I said, why don't we mess around with some sparklers since it's still not dark yet? Great idea. We went into my backyard where it hadn't rained in well over 2 months and it was extremely dry. You see the problem here? One of the little sparklers from mine and my friend's sparkler made contact with the ground and caused 2 small fires that quickly spread to a large area. I ran as fast as I could to grab the garden hose and quickly started spraying down the fire. It was no use, it was spreading faster than I could spray it. I handed my friend the hose and called cops. What felt like hours was only 4 minutes, and the fire was spreading to the neighbor's fence. The neighbor came outside and they were fairly calm, grabbed their hose and sprayed down the fence along with the dead grass in her yard. The fire department finally showed up, and I told my friend, "Only one of us needs to get in trouble. You should leave." He was reluctant to leave because he felt equally responsible, but I convinced him. I didn't want him to get in trouble and have to drop out of college. My neighbor was super chill about the entire situation at first. I told her that we could talk about replacing the fence and get some quotes to repair it. She was just super grateful that everyone was okay. About 2 hours after the fire, the arson fire investigator came to question me about the fire. I told him the truth. I said I was in the backyard by myself playing with fireworks and accidentally lit the ground on fire. I had gotten off that day without being hit by any charges and was commended for being honest. Here is where it goes downhill very fast. About a week later, I get a knock on the door from the neighbor. I open the door, and she handed me 2 pieces of paper for me to look at. There was a quote for the fence valued at around $4,000 and an estimate for lawn care valued around $6,000. These were really shady and just typed out on a Microsoft Word document, no logo or company name. She then adds, "I will also be having you pay my water bill for 3 months because the new yard will need lots of water." Now the fence this woman had before was raggedy and falling apart. Her yard? Dead grass, weeds everywhere, never mowed it. Now, looking at this paper, she wants a mahogany fence in a brand new backyard with flowers and trimmed hedges. I said, "I need to get an estimate myself. This doesn't feel right." She says, "Remember, you agreed to replace my fence and a real man keeps promises." I shut the door and called my dad to tell him about what just happened. He flipped out and told me, "Son, don't you give that slut a single dime." He gives me the number to his handyman and tells me to take care of it. The next day I had the guy come out for an estimate and the neighbor ran outside flailing her arms. "I did not give you permission to get an estimate on my fence." Technically, it separates the property line, so it's both of our fences. She calls the cops on me for having a contractor, and they ultimately can't do a single thing because I'm on my property. He quickly finishes the estimate off at $1,200. I also knew a guy who did lawn care for my time working at the grocery store. He estimated the lawn reseeding while she was away from the house to be about $800. After I got these estimates, I gave copies to the woman, and she was having none of it. "I don't know these people. I don't want them near my house. They're probably really crappy contractors." I said, "No, I know them personally. They're really nice people and do great work." She shut the door in my face and I went on my way. I ended up working a 16-hour shift that night and got home at 8 a.m. This woman comes knocking on my door at 9 a.m. and demands I speak to her. I explained, "I would really love to do this, but I just got home and I have to be back at work in less than 5 hours. I need to sleep." She goes, "What kind of lazy asshat sleeps in until 2 p.m.? At this point, I had about lost it and told her, "You can either accept my $2,000 for my quotes or kiss my ass and get nothing." She stood there for a while with her mouth gaping open, but she accepted my offer and planned to meet down at the notary the next morning. I spent that night after I got off work writing a contract and gathering the $2,000 in cash. The next morning, I woke up and grabbed this contract to meet down at the notary. I was thrilled to finally be done with this broad and never speak to her again. I waited for her for over 3 hours and she didn't show up. I got a call from her saying, "I'm sorry, the $2,000 isn't enough. I'm having my guys start work on this project and you will be paying me full price." Oh, really? After that, I did not say a single word to her and I watched for a few months as these guys turned her backyard into an oasis, complete with a small pond, brand new sod, and flowers, the whole 9 yards. Come to find out, she had plans to remodel these things for a long time and was just waiting for the opportunity to go through with it. Also during this time, she used her remodel funds to go on a trip to Hawaii. You know how I found out about this? She was bragging about it on the neighborhood Facebook group and didn't know I was in it. I have a different Facebook name than my real name. Are you ready for the revenge? Now, 4 months after the fire and all the remodels, I get served papers to go to court for $10,300. At 18 years old, I'm having to hire a lawyer to work my case. When we finally do get into court, I lay everything out, the quotes, being harassed multiple times, not showing up after agreeing to a deal, not wanting me to get my own quotes, required by law, by the way, and her bragging about screwing me out of money. And I have proof of all of this. The judge looked at her and said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're out of your dagum mind." Not only did this young man tell the truth of what happened, he offered to pay you more than he was supposed to. Your lawn was already dead before the fire occurred. Therefore, he is only responsible for the fence of $1,200. I will also deduct from this his lawyer fees, $800. So I burned this woman's fence down, and all I'm having to give her is $400. Cool. She took a huge financial loss from this. I'm not sure how much the Hawaii trip cost her, but she was in serious debt. She ended up having to sell the house because of it and moved into a smaller house. I haven't heard anything from her since. The next one is a petty revenge story. I recently attended a friend's wedding a few hours away from home, and the girlfriend and I decided to get an Airbnb so she could bring her dog. We found a nice place that allowed pets, took off early from work, and arrived Friday late afternoon. About 30 minutes later, the owner shows up to see how we're doing while we have the dog on the porch. We make some small talk, and he mentions that we didn't indicate we were bringing a dog. I felt bad, as it was an honest mistake and I'd never lie to someone to get out of paying the pet fee. We tell him that and offer to pay the $25 fee on the spot. He refuses to take the money and says that he loves dogs and eventually heads out. We don't think too much else about it, but when we leave, we decide to give the place a much more thorough cleaning than was in the instructions. The dog didn't chew any furniture or leave any other damage or mess, at least that we didn't clean up. In our minds, the trip was a success, and the Airbnb was a great fit. I got the email from them to leave a review, and I left a 5-star review and said the house and the owner were great. But then I saw his review of me and a private message where he blasted me for not telling him that I was bringing a dog, how dogs caused them so much more work, and how we shouldn't leave dogs alone in the house. This didn't sit well with me at all since I thought we had handled this person to person when he came by on the first day. I was, and still am, happy to pay for the pet fee, and there was no indication anywhere on the posting that we couldn't leave the dog alone for a few hours while we were at a wedding, nor did he say that while we chatted and told him we were here for a wedding. For him to post that on my Airbnb profile felt like a cheap shot. I responded to him in the chat and said as much, and while Airbnb couldn't do anything about the review since it didn't violate any of their policies, my girlfriend did point out that hosts aren't supposed to show up to the property unannounced. I had no idea and figured this was his property, and he is allowed to show up, at least to check in with the guests. Normally I wouldn't care, especially since it was a very cordial interaction, but since he took a cheap shot with my review, I decided to do the same. I reached out to Airbnb support to tell them about his unannounced visit, and they forwarded it to their security team. I answered a few questions about the interaction, and they spoke to him. A week or so later, they let me know that he was in violation of their policy, and they refunded me 2-3 days of the stay, which came out to about $200, all because of a bad review. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I was busy cleaning the sinks in a restroom when a wild Karen stormed in with her 2 clearly embarrassed children. She pointed to an empty stall. "I want that toilet clean now!" It was a slow night and I was bored, so I said, in my sweetest hospitality voice and with every intention of having some fun at her expense, "Of course, ma'am, just let me change my gloves." I changed my gloves, making a show of checking for holes in the material before pushing my cart to the stall. I grabbed the chemical with the longest dwell time, 3 minutes, which is forever in guest time, and sprayed down the toilet. I put the chemical back on the cart and wiped down the toilet. I was in the process of changing out my gloves when Wild Karen tried to push me aside. I'm a big woman at 275 pounds of mostly muscle, so it's like trying to push over a brick wall. "Oh, no, ma'am, I'm not done yet. I have to disinfect the toilet. I want it super clean for you." "How long will that take?" Wild Karen asked, impatient. "My youngest really has to go." "Oh, about 3 minutes," I said, setting the timer on my work phone and holding it up to her to show it. "But if you want, you're more than welcome to use any of the other stalls I've cleaned, which is all of them." "This is ridiculous," she huffed, dragging her kids to another stall. The kids shot me an apologetic look as she shoved them in, went in herself, and closed the stall door. I turned up the volume on my work phone so she'd hear the timer go off, as I guessed she'd be finished long after the toilet was disinfected. And I was right. I had finished wiping down the toilet when Wild Karen and her 2 kids came out. "I'm going to complain to your manager about how long you took," she hollered as she stormed out. "Have a good night then," I shouted after her. Later that night, I was turning in my equipment when Miss Heroine, who appeared in a previous MC story involving a manager and a compactor, came up struggling not to laugh. "I understand you took too long to clean a toilet," she said before bursting into laughter. I laughed right back and said, "Well, she asked me to clean it." The next one is an entitled people story. This morning I was out mowing my lawn. I happened to be wearing a ratty t-shirt that had a logo from a video game that I enjoy playing. We live in a very small town in northern Wisconsin. Everyone just kind of minds their own business, so we have never had much interaction with any of our neighbors, which is fine with us. One of the houses next to ours is a rental property that the owners converted into a duplex. The bottom half is empty and there are two adults, a man and a woman, who live in the upper unit with two kids. I have never spoken to the parents, as they have never made an attempt to even give the neighbor wave when we see them outside. However, this morning the mom starts walking over towards me, so I stop the lawnmower and say good morning. She comments about how we have such a big house. I tell her it is because we like having lots of pets, 4 cats and 2 dogs, and that we usually adopt animals with medical issues since I am a nurse and my niece is a vet. We make a little more chit-chat and go about finishing mowing the lawn. I go inside to do some other chores, and I hear a knock on the door. I check the cameras, and there are 2 kids standing at my door. I make it a policy that I do not interact with children who do not have a parent with them, especially because I am a gay man, and, with the current political state, it is better to be safe than sorry. So I ignore the knocks and continue with my chores. A few minutes go by, and the woman I spoke to earlier in the yard is standing there, so I open the door. She is upset that I ignored her children when they came over, as they wanted to play with our pets. I tell her that I would never allow children in my house who do not have a parent with them, and that our pets are not play toys for her children. So then she asks if they could play video games since I must be a gamer because of the shirt I had on. I reiterate that I would never allow children without an adult to be in our home. She then starts going on about needing some alone time because her boyfriend left her, and she is the only one on the lease since he has bad credit, and she cannot afford her rent, and she just needs some time to herself. I apologize that she is having a rough time, but explain that my husband and I would not be willing to entertain her children for her. She looks perplexed for a bit, and I am curious as to what confused her. Then she says something that makes me lose it in a major way. She says, "Gross. Why do fags have to be my neighbors?" I reply, "Look here, you nasty person. You will never say that to me or my husband again. You need to leave right now." And I slam the door in her face. She keeps pounding on our door, screaming all kinds of slurs and obscenities. Because we have had some issues with kids destroying property, we have cameras all over the outside of our house, so I turn on the alarm on all of them. She gets the message then and leaves. Like, what the actual heck? I have never been so glad to have cameras everywhere outside. The next one is an entitled parent story. For context, my childhood was spent growing up in Dubai in a villa compound, which is basically like a mini gated community of 16 odd villa homes that each have a private back garden that then converges in a large shared space with a pool, social area, foliage, etc. Now, as a result of this, everyone got to know their neighbors very well due to the shared social space, and as most homes had kids, we'd all play together in the pool. There was a particular family with 2 very entitled children whom we shall call Anna and Francis, not actual names, who must have been about 9. These little turds were well known for causing trouble in the community and generally being extremely entitled. One story that sticks out most to me is the following, which I hope you enjoy. One afternoon, my younger brother runs into our house, having been playing in a group with some other kids and Anna and Francis, very frustrated. He announces to me that Anna and Francis are currently in our private back garden ripping the heads off our flowers. I, of course, go outside to find the 2 gremlins, ripping apart plants and kicking our hedges while being supervised by their nanny, who spoke very little English. Me: "What do you think you're doing?" Anna: "Duck you, we can do what we want." Me: "Stop that and get out of our garden." The nanny just stood there with a vacant expression on her face, so I walk up to her, as the kids continue to destroy our garden. Me: "Excuse me, aren't you going to do something?" Nanny: "No, they do what they want till dinner." Me: "This is our garden. Can you make them leave, please?" This time, no response besides vacant blinking, So naturally, my younger brother and I turn to the gremlins and very firmly tell them, "Stop and get out now," and start to usher them towards the exit. This is when Anna drops some big threats. "Anna, my mother owns this whole compound. We own your house, a-hole." They had colorful language for children their age. Me. "She really doesn't. Now get out." Anna. "We own your house. We can break anything we want. We can do anything you want. We'll get you kicked out." At this point, we've pushed them out, followed meekly by their nanny, and locked the garden gate. On the other side, they hurl obscenities and eventually run off to find their entitled mother. I'm told by my own mom that she had a heated conversation with the EM, who, in fact, did not own the compound, nor our house, but was very displeased that her children's fun was interrupted by my brother and me. Apparently, we have no right to upset or interfere in matters involving her children, and we would do well to keep our business to ourselves, or the landlord would be called. Suffice to say, my mom was not having any of it and asked politely that her children don't invite themselves into our garden and don't destroy our property, which was, in fact, grounds to involve the landlord. The EM left in a huff, and we didn't hear from them for a couple of weeks, thankfully, but it wouldn't be long before we crossed paths with their BS again. If you enjoyed this one, I have plenty more tales from the compound involving entitled parents and kids. As I'm sure you've guessed, Dubai does tend to have some rather entitled people in it, although I did love my time there. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.